Good morning, good morning. Well, this is my first time I've ever been at a literary festival. So if anybody else's first time, I say hello, we're first timers. Thank you for coming out in the rain and coming to listen to Em and me have a chat.
We're both slightly out of our comfort zones today, I think it's fair to say, because I'm much happier being on the interviewing side of things rather than sort of pretending that I've got, a red carpet to talk about. And Rachel is, sort of queen of Hollywood and has suddenly found herself, hate that, but has suddenly found herself sort of asking questions. And I guess what we're trying to do a bit today, and what the blurb sort of hints at, is this way that we've sort of found, I guess, different roles that that I have been exploring a sort of world which is much closer to yours, and maybe you can set the scene for us.
Yes. Well, there was an evening, was it a couple of years ago now, when I was having dinner?
No, it was September. It was just last September.
It was just now?
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
I mean, it was last,
one year ago. 1 year ago. Yeah, things don't move fast enough for you in news. I've been trying to explain to Emily that when you make films or television, it takes many, many years, and Emily's not used to that length of time. But it was really only a year ago. I was having dinner at Em's house, and she started to tell me about the series that was going to be made. And just by sheer coincidence, the director and the art designer were coming over to the house towards the end of the dinner. They'd been scheduled to be there, and in they come, very lovely, but they're here to inspect Emily's real life, and her husband and her dog and her children weren't there, but I felt incredible anxiety for her, because Em is a deeply private person, and I suddenly got worried that your life was going to be invaded in this way, and I felt very protective and tried to give you some advice. I don't know if it was helpful.
So Rachel and I go back a long way. I mean, we won't do it in years, but
Emma's my oldest friend, so we've known each other since we were 3. I think.
Our parents were very
close friends.
Very close friends, and we were childhood friends. And I think at one point I tried to lure Rachel into a prospective career
in
news, where we edited what we called the Burger magazine together.
Age 5.
Yeah, Age 5, and we put together a sort of template of this news burger with sort of lettuce and
the bun
and
was
the whole
sports, and the bacon was
exactly.
plays, and
for some reason it never took off. I mean, don't ask me. We were early adopters, and the world was behind us. But anyway, we each went our separate ways, and I guess our careers have been we've looked at each other from afar, and then suddenly I was calling up Rachel and saying, help, this is your world, and I don't know how to deal with this. I was making a very royal scandal, I probably should have said that at the beginning, which was the 3-part Amazon drama that just came out, and based on the sort of events and the consequences of the Newsnight interview that the team did with Prince Andrew. And so I went to Rachel first of all and said, what should I be doing? How much of myself should I give? Should I, do I open up my freezer and let them see the vodka? Or do I sort of shut it?
You did.
I did.
Yes.
I mean, and weirdly, there's this wonderful scene where there is vodka and wine gums, and I thought that's an incredible production team that they know that I also freeze my wine gums as well as my vodka, and that was inside. And I think your sense there was give as much of yourself. You're not trying. They're not trying to be you. They're trying to create a character around you, and you were very. You sort of helped. You helped me be a bit more cautious about that, didn't you?
Yeah, because I felt that, I mean, as Em just said, that we've watched each other in our respective worlds, and my world is fiction. It's all about fiction. Your world is not. It's about getting to the truth. And I just wanted you to have a sense that even though there needed to be facts investigated, that some of you needed to stay private. So I felt protective of that. And I was curious about how responsible you felt in having this story told in a fictional form, how responsible you felt to the whole story, to your team that you work with at the BBC, and how how did it feel? How did it feel to have your life put up there on a screen like this and fictionalized?
Yeah, you've put your finger on it, which is that I loved working with Ruth Wilson, who was playing me, and she was incredibly sensitive about so much of the stuff. She came to my office, she came to work, she came to Newsnight, she had a voice coach, she had a movement coach. Yeah. All this was bewildering to me. Not, it's your world, you know, where you work with somebody the whole time. And I think the thing that I felt I had to get right was I wasn't just telling my story, or we weren't just telling my story, we were putting words in colleagues' mouths. And so there was a moment where I sort of had to just, I mean, luckily, a lot of the team, the Newsnight team, were part of the process. So the scriptwriter, the writer went to them and said, what's your recollection? It was a bit like an episode of The Reunion, where everyone sort of comes in and offers their own sort of fragments of memories and puts it together. But funny enough, there were some lines and some characters that we cut completely because I said, I don't know. I don't know that the head of news said that. I'm not sure that, you know, the director of, you know, the channel would have said that. What if they don't like that? Or what if that sort of, you know, changes the story, or, you know? And so I felt this real responsibility of you're trying to work in this world which is as close to the facts as you can remember them, but also allowing a creative team to craft something that has to be a drama, you know, otherwise just go and watch the interview again. And so I guess, you know, Salman Rushdie talked about the space yesterday between, you know, the sort of the thinking of the thing and what it becomes. And I love this idea of the space, because into that space we had to then fill in where does the fiction come from, and what are we allowed to craft versus, you know, sticking to something that has to be authentic. And you've done this. You've played a real person. And so I'm going to throw this back at you and say, when you were Deborah Lipstadt in the Holocaust denial drama of David Irving, where David Irving, do we still call him a historian? I mean, I'm not that comfortable with that term, but no, right? Okay, thank you. Had basically sued Deborah Lipstadt, who called him out as a Holocaust denier, and you took on her role. Tell us.
Well, Deborah Lipstadt is less known and recognisable than you. Perhaps she might be more known now since Biden made her put her in charge of fighting anti-Semitism in America. She has an official White House role now. But yeah, she's from Queens. She's a very straight shooter. She's about as un-English as it gets. So my journey to play her was a really long journey. I would say a longer journey than for Ruth Wilson to play you, which I think Ruth did, you know, spectacularly. So I spent a lot of time with Deborah. She sat in my kitchen and I filmed her and I interviewed her, and just tried to get her inside my body. I didn't use a movement coach, but I tried to feel what it felt like to be her.
What did you do with her? Like, did you follow her around? Did you go to the shops with her? Did you, I mean, what was your...
No, we just sat and talked. We just sat and talked. She told me her life history. She told me about the trial. I recorded her so I could go. So I wanted to get her at moments where she was being kind of official and talking about the trial, and then when she was just off the cuff, just being a non-professional human being. So yeah, I did have her on the set with me most of the time because I found it really useful to have her there. And she's got this shock of bright red curly hair, and I was wearing a bright red wig, so these two sort of red-haired curly hair people bobbing about. And sometimes I just sort of catch her, you know, behind the camera, sort of gesticulating and being, you know, talking to everyone. She's quite loud. She's not a quiet person. It was a kind of interesting and strange feeling to be portraying somebody and seeing the real them just on the other side of the room. But I rather like that.
And did she step in? Like, did she say no?
She did try. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. She's I'd say a straight shooter, and she's not. She's made a career out of not being polite or she's very direct and she says what she thinks. So yeah, she did step in.
She's a real New Yorker.
She's a real New Yorker. Yeah.
And when she is kind of helping you find her, were you kind of thinking, back off, I'm not being you, I'm being the David Hare character of you? Like, did you ever kind of go, this is too much? Because Ruth was, and I loved this and I really respected it, Ruth just said, I don't want you on set. It was a bit too kind of like Back to the Future. You know, I don't want to meet my mother on the disco floor, whatever, you know. And I sort of got that. She said, it will be too weird if I am trying to be you and just as you say, catch you out of the corner of my eye, you know, scowling or something, you know, I wouldn't do that, you know. And so I'm interested from the actor's perspective, whether you would say, yeah, you know, it's really important that we, the reals, as it were, step back and let you take over, or whether you just found it really helpful.
I think every actor would work differently, and I do think I completely understand Ruth's point of view that she just had to claim her her Emily, without feeling like she was getting something wrong. And if you're there, you're a continual reminder that she might be slightly off. But with Deborah, I don't know, it was such a long journey to be her that I just rather liked having her around. It was kind of almost talismanic to see her there and get her spirit. We were filming in England. I was surrounded by British people, so I needed a big dose of Queens in the house. Yeah, so she really helped me. But I also I really understand why Ruth said, stay away, stay away.
And we were going back through the cast list, and I was saying, oh yeah, well, who are the other real characters in Denial? And we suddenly remembered
Anthony Julius,
the lawyer, Andrew Scott.
Yeah.
And so it's so funny, it completely slipped but I remember him with these sort of tiny little glasses, being very sort of loyally, but also quite, you know, an upstart, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He was very young and very knew exactly. And I don't know whether Anthony Julius appeared on the set then, or if he was like.
He did, yes, he did visit.
I mean, barristers are always getting. Funnily enough, I think there are barristers that are always getting portrayed, right? I think Michael Mansfield has been in like 8 dramas or something.
And we actually filmed in the offices of Mishcon de Reya, which was the firm that Anthony Julius worked from. And the director was he was really interested in there being elements of documentary. So for the trial, I wore the exact scarf, Hermes scarf that Deborah wore, the exact coat, the costume. Yes, well, we couldn't find another scarf. Yeah, I borrowed her scarf.
So you literally had her around your neck?
I very much had her around my neck. Yeah, and still do, rather lovingly, yes. She's a tenacious gal.
So she's still in touch?
Yes, very much so, yeah, she is, yeah, she's a real character. But what you were saying before about, you know, responsibility and what I was so curious about watching the show was, you know, things that I was curious about. How did the fiction writer get permission from you, or was just dared to dream of things about, for instance, at the end of episode 2, Andrew is at a shooting party and having a lovely time. The interview's come out, and he's feeling rather proud of himself. And there's this phone call, and he answers. It says, "Mummy," and then we go into episode 3, and there's this dramatic irony of, you know, we, the audience, know that things have not gone as well as Prince Andrew thinks that they have. But, for instance, was he at a shooting party, or did the writer just make that up, or because there are things that where you couldn't have been present. Right. Obviously, you couldn't have advised the writer about what Prince Andrew did when he wasn't with you. Yes, exactly. We knew what we knew about the newsroom, and we knew what we knew about the interview preparation and the fallout, because that was, you know, my Newsnight team, and as I said, we'd all sort of put in our collective memories. And weirdly, some of the things that that were in the drama were new to me, because I had never had conversations about certain things. So there's a bit where, I mean, spoiler alert, blah, 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 but there's a bit where the interview is nearly called off. And I said, oh, is that what you needed for, you know, dramatic irony? You know, that's funny. Yeah. And Stu, my deputy editor, went, no, it was. We just didn't tell you. We didn't want to freak you out. And I was like, oh, right. So that actually happened. And he's like, yeah, but we just thought you know, we thought we could get it back, and we didn't want that in your head. So we sort of let that go. The palace stuff was obviously a completely different challenge, because how would we ever know what was in the relationship with
between Andrew and his daughters, or Andrew and his, you know, ex-wife, or the conversations with the courtiers. But I guess what I would say is that we were a team of journalists, and we carried on being a team of journalists after that interview, and we pieced together things that actually made sense from what we were told. And I had at least 2, I think possibly 3 sources that talked me through the shooting party that happened. And the interview is on a Thursday lunchtime, just after lunch, on Thursday the 14th of November. And I knew people who were part of that, the shooting party on the Saturday. And actually in the drama, we put it in the evening because for dramatic reasons, you get this sense of everyone is watching the interview go out, and he's still larking around playing charades, you know,
and
in the drawing room. The game where you name the person on your Post-it, and there's something slightly kind of, it's just it's this perfect clash. You know, the script writing is sort of beautiful at that bit because you get everyone is sort of going, what just happened? What just happened? And he's kind of larking around in a sort of ballroom after a shooting party, sort of, you know, playing charades with his mates. And it wasn't actually the evening. I think it happened at lunchtime. And they'd sort of gone for this, I guess we have to call it a straightforward shooting weekend now, but it was a sort of few drives, you know, in the morning, and then they'd sat down for lunch. And apparently what we heard, and I have no verification, but as I say, I heard this from sort of 2 different sources, was that the late Queen had just read the transcript at that point and very cannily understood what it meant, and she had put a call through and that had hit Prince Andrew at lunchtime and said, I think you need to come out.
And you shared this with the screenwriter?
I shared it with the screenwriter, and he could then, of course, do what he wanted with it. And in the end, it didn't, you know, it didn't have to be at lunchtime. It was in the evening, but that's why that episode ends with a call from, you know, Mummy.
So you carried on being a journalist.
Well, of course, because
how could you not?
We were fascinated, you know. And one of the things that we tried really hard to do with this series was not just end at the interview. It was never meant to be a kind of like slap on the back, yay. It was meant to be a kind of like, and then what, right? Then what happened? And the then what was really important for us as a team. You know, the consequences, the places where it didn't actually have closure. You know, you have this moment, this absolute high as a journalist, thinking, oh my God, you know, maybe we've changed the world. And then you have this sort of dawning realization that comes maybe months or maybe years later that maybe nothing changed. And we've tried to be quite honest with that and say, what is, you know, the power of journalism, but also what is its kind of limitation in that. And so, yes, the journalism continued for years afterwards, because actually people wanted to talk to me about it, and people who'd been part of that, you know, setup. I mean, there were lots of people who would pull me aside and go, I just want you to know, and they'd tell me an anecdote about Andrew, or they'd tell me something that I hadn't known, or they'd tell me about the days and weeks afterwards. And that was really useful. I mean, we never, you know, it's not the stuff that you'd go and do as breaking news. It was just part of the fabric that then helped inform, I think, part 3 of the drama. Now,
and the other, one more question. just, I was also fascinated by what protocol could there have been to stop it from being aired after you'd filmed it? How many people actually knew what the contents were of the interview before it went out? Very, very few. Wow. We kept a team very, very close and tight, because the BBC is an absolutely wonderful, it's an incredible organisation, and it can, you know, the sky's the limit in terms of what you can achieve. But it's also, you know, it is also possible that things get lost in the sort of the email chain, should I say. And so we just wanted to be very careful that this was something that actually just didn't get steered off course. And was it obvious what slot it was going to go into? No, we had no slot. You had no slot. It was the weirdest thing, because I did Newsnight, which was, you know,
a sort of Monday to Friday programme.
I think most people know about Newsnight.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. But it's a weird, it's a sort of 40-minute slot, and on a Friday night it's a 30-minute slot, and we'd recorded it on the Thursday, and I was like, oh.
And you had an interview of an hour.
We had an interview of an hour, and we'd been promised this hour, and so I remember this really funny moment where we'd just been told that we had it, and Esme Wren, my editor, was like, right, I think I better go and get a slot, and it's like suddenly.
How did you go about that? How did you go about getting a slot?
It's like having ownership of a Maserati and going, I don't have a garage. Like, I don't know. I have no. Do I have to get a residence permit, or do I? What I do, Yeah. And so she. I remember this really clearly. She went up to the channel control and she said, I think I need to see you urgently. We've got something that feels like a property, an asset. And he was in a meeting, and so she came down, and I said, did you get it? Did you get it? She was like, oh no, he was in a meeting. And I said, about what? And she was like, oh, music copyright. And I was like, do you think maybe we should interrupt the meeting? Because I'm sure music copyright's really important, but I feel like time is of the essence here.
Yeah.
We've got to go back to the palace and say, we promise a proper slot. We wanted to give it dignity and sort of space, and the one thing we'd promised was space and breadth. And Esme was like, yes, I think you're right. And it's so funny how you're in this moment, you're sort of locked into this moment of sheer panic where you don't want to over-anticipate what you might have. And so you're kind of going, oh, I'm sure we'll work it out, Anyway, we eventually got the controller out and we said, I think we've got this thing. And then there was a question of, was it BBC One, was it BBC Two,
But the people that were giving you the slot hadn't actually read the transcript or watched it.
We hadn't done it. So it could have been a disaster. And of course, you're then in this place where you might have the slot, but if he'd walked out the interview, then you've got this whacking great hour-long slot, on Saturday prime time, and you don't have anything to fill it.
You get the slot before you've filmed
it. We could have had the girl with the dog and the
the
rainbow, the bars. And so you're kind of and you sort of think, oh, I shouldn't have to think about, my head should be in what went on at Epstein's house in Manhattan in 2010. It shouldn't be like, oh, does music copyright meeting come before the, so all this stuff was sort of going through. And I mean, now I sort of look back and I think that was, the comedy of it came from the fact that we didn't, it wasn't real. It felt totally unreal, that whole sort of period where we only knew on Tuesday morning. I said, let's do it straight away. Then the Prince wanted a day to sort of prepare, ended up being on Thursday. I remember I was meant to be going to talk to an American former chief of staff of Trump's, and I was like, oh, can I do both? I was like, oh, I'm sure I can do lunch with John Kelly, and then I can go on to do Prince Andrew.
Not like you to multitask.
I know, and then so all these things sort of dawning.
But
slowly.
once it had been filmed, could it then have been prevented from airing?
I guess. Who would have?
I don't know.
That's a really big question, right? Because would the monarch step? From what we know, and obviously this is only from sort of what sources have told us, from what we know, she read the transcript and pulled him back, but she did not interfere with the working of the BBC, which I think
so before it aired, she read the transcript?
She read it
before
on Saturday morning, and it aired on Saturday evening. So she must have known the full weight of what was sort of coming down the tunnel, but she never stepped in. And the BBC, I can't see a world in which they would have pulled it, but I honestly don't know what pressure would look like. If you were pressurised from the very top of the monarchy, I mean, aren't we lucky, honestly, that we live in a country in which there is a division between, a head of state and the media? I mean, long may that last, sort of thing. So, Rach, I'm going to. I want you to talk about the weirdest bit of my whole experience.
Yes, you've had a busy week.
Was the junket. And
I've been thinking about Em a lot, being on the other side of things. It was being interviewed, made
you're
up.
You're parcelled around and it goes too fast and everyone has...
Press junket.
Press junket. So tell, when you do them, talk me through what's normal and what and how satisfying they are, because go on.
Well, in the Julia Roberts film Notting Hill, I think people see what a press junket is like in fictional terms. It's actually really like that. You get 3 minutes with each journalist. There's a stopwatch going off that's clicking away. And actually, it's impossible for the person being interviewed, the actor, to say anything sensible. But I have a lot of empathy for the journalists, because there they are, you know, you've waited all day to come and speak to somebody for 3 minutes. Yeah. And with 3 minutes, what can you do? What kind of interesting question can you ask? And I think the whole thing should be redesigned into some other kind of format. But I was thinking about Em going through this, doing red carpets and, you know, being sat in a chair and having journalists come in one after the other for 3 minutes. And I could
tell me, what would you redesign? Stay with that. So you've done this. I mean, you've done what, 40 films? More? I mean,
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Honest.
Yeah, I didn't count. Yeah.
And has it always been like this?
It's always been like that. It has never changed.
I love getting like the confirmation in the front row. Yeah, it's always been like this.
It's always been like this. Yeah, there's been no kind of evolution into any kind of more sophisticated or kind or empathic form for the journalists or for the actors.
And do you feel that, I mean, that's just because it's stopped being a work of art and it's just become a commercial, it's the moment where the art hits the commercials side of things,
for sure, right? But I feel like it sort of infantilizes both the actors and the journalists, and it doesn't allow anybody to investigate anything in any interesting way, and it's just become stuck in this form. How would I reinvent it? I don't know, maybe if you could do, I don't know, a press conference where everybody could get to ask a question, or you could do a lengthy sit-down interview, one-on-one, for each country, for each territory. I don't know.
Would you want that?
I would much prefer that. Because
and you would say, so, you know, because we had in the press conference, the junket, we had, you know, Venezuela and Norway and Ecuador, and so you'd say, yes, I will do a long
interview with each territory. I think that would be much better. Because didn't you find that it was mostly, and it was not through the fault of the journalists, very banal?
We were doing it sort of on Zoom, and it's exactly as you say. It was like 5 minutes, and there's this awful moment because I'm feeling like the journalist, and I've been in that situation a million times where, you know, somebody sort of waltzes on, and you're like, oh my God, just you know, they're running late, and you've only got 5 minutes, and you feel all the pressure of, am I going to get something amazing? And you just want something that sounds authentic, like you want something that sounds like they're speaking to you, as opposed to going, blah, 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 I've said this 16 times.
Yes.
And actually, we got some really interesting questions, I would say. We got a lot of questions about journalism, actually, and I mean, I call that interesting, because obviously, you know, it's my world, but about press freedom and about what I'd learned, you know, in terms of how journalism could work. And then we went through all the countries, and I loved, my favourite one was this, it was, I think, Norway TV, or maybe it was their day, and she just stood up and she said, Emily, our own royal in Norway is going through a tax scandal at the moment. What do you think is inappropriate to ask and not ask, and all the rest of it? And it's like, wow, I was not expecting a Norwegian royal sort of tax scandal question. And it was like, it was so lovely to be able to say, I'm so ignorant of this that all I can do is sort of bring my, you know, it feels to me that you could ask that, but I didn't know the details. But I love the fact that some people just went completely off. I sort of quite liked it. They went completely off-piste and went to their own. What's the weirdest thing that you've been asked? Or most unusual thing?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I can't really remember it. What tends to happen is, I haven't done it on Zoom, actually, but sitting in a room from 8 in the morning till 6 p.m. Not much oxygen, under lights, and the journalists, I think everyone's in a kind of slight stupor. That's my experience of it. And I feel like the journalists are slightly falling asleep, and so are the actors. And so sometimes we do this thing where we say to each other, everyone's in different rooms, okay, in order to keep your brain alert, because you can kind of just zone out a little bit, try and include this word in your answer and give it to each other, and it could be like microwave, geranium, extraterrestrial, whatever it is. So you're thinking, how can I possibly insert this word? Yeah, so we do things like that to stay awake. I mean, I'm glad that you got some interesting questions. I'm really happy for you. I generally don't feel like I have. But again, not through the fault of the journalist. I think it's the form that denies any kind of
And
relaxation.
when you're saying microwave geranium, does anyone go, "Gay"? You know, do you ever get sort of people going, what does...
No. It's become a kind of art form to include the word.
Love it.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very gracefully done and seems incredibly relevant.
Some amazing metaphor.
Yeah, exactly.
Sort of some Confucian proverb that's sort of loosely translated. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And will you talk through some of the roles that you've picked, just to sort of go away from the junket and back to the art, because you've had your own experience with Amazon recently, an Amazon series, and Rachel took on, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but just as a sort of overview, and did you sort of exec it as well? Was it your own? Did you Dead Ringers?
Yes.
So Rachel was playing twins in the Cronenberg adaptation, and it's the most extraordinary thing because I still think of there being two actresses. You know, I've watched the whole thing, and you took on twins, Beverly and Elliot, and so I'm really intrigued with how you come to a role where you're not just I wouldn't say impersonating, but you're not just creating one role. You're creating one role, and then you're creating a secondary role, which is so tied to the first role in DNA, but has to be different because you have to feel the different characteristics. Was that why you did it? Was it just was it a technical challenge for you to do that?
No, in fact, I never thought about the technical challenge until the very end. I just was drawn to the story of codependent identical twins, which in the Cronenberg film is played by Jeremy Irons, and I had the idea of what if you turned this into a longer form, 6 hours of television instead of 90 minutes. Thank you, 90 minutes of a film, and I was just fascinated by their dark, weird, and joyful codependence, and I was interested in telling a story about sisters. So I didn't really and the writing was so brilliant. It was showrun by a brilliant writer called Alice Birch. That they were on the page two completely different characters. I just thought of them as just two sisters who lived together, worked together, played together, did everything
And how
together.
would you have done that? Because they were shot together a lot of the time.
There was a very large technical challenge, which I discovered in the lead up to filming. I think I always thought that there were going to be two people playing them, and then of course I realised I was going to do both. So yeah.
Did you? So you actually?
Well, I know that sounds insane.
Value for money.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You know, in this day and age.
Yeah, it just felt like there would be two different embodiments, and in fact there were. So I worked with an acting partner, Kitty Hawthorne, and she played opposite me. So right now, let's say I'm Elliot. She has her hair down. She's ravenously hungry. She's on the front foot. She's very energetic. She's quite controlling. She's kind of an extrovert, I guess. And you would be Kitty, playing Beverly, her sister, who's more introverted. We would film the scene, and then...
So you have got somebody there?
Oh, very much so.
Okay.
I had a wonderful actress called Kitty opposite me, yes. And the technology is such that they film the scene and then literally cut the frame in half, so that when we swapped, and then I became Beverly with my hair up on that side. There was a little more than just hair up and hair down, but I became Beverly on that side.
But you gave them, didn't you, like proper characteristics? So you would, we the audience would always know, like even by the way Elliot ate her burger.
Yes.
Have I got that right?
Yeah, she eats burgers all day.
Right, she's like, you could see the raven of the hunger, like she sort of tears at the meat, and you'd sort of worked out the way that we, the audience, could get who you were straight away, not just hair up and hair down, right?
Yes. I mean, I spent years working on these characters, so I had them sort of. They were just radically different people. I mean, so I had them both inside me after I'd worked and imagined being them. So, yeah, they were like miles apart as personalities. So it became easy to shift from one to the other after a time.
And you were part of the writing experience for that whole thing.
Yes, so it basically, for better or for worse, it was my idea to do this, and I approached Alice Birch, and she and I sat down and we kind of mapped out the basic differences between these two women. We also had the Cronenberg story for the kind of outline of the plot, and then she invited me into the writers' room, which we did during lockdown on Zoom. and there were six women in the writers' room, 6 writers, and we all wrote story together. It was my first experience of a writers' room. I'm seeing Nicole Taylor there, the incredible showrunner, sitting there. So yeah, I'd never had that experience before, and yeah, everyone would offer story. So you'd say, oh, what about? Well, we'd actually say, well, not this, but what if Elliot's walking down the street and you know, a UFO comes down and
wait, explain the not this thing, because the not this is a really interesting phrase.
Yes, I don't know. I have to ask other writers if this happens in all writers' rooms. But in our room, we would offer up a storyline, and I learned from these other writers to preface the idea with, okay, not this, but what if, and my understanding of that, we never actually discussed what it might mean. I just picked up the vernacular from the room, was that we were saying, this is the mood and the feeling and the possibility. This is my offer. This is the offer from my imagination in this moment, but I'm not positing myself as sole authority on this moment. It could be something slightly different to this, slightly inspired by this. So I found it kind of a rather beautiful, polite way to offer up treasures, you know, goodies from your imagination.
So my only experience of the sort of the sales pitch, if you like, or the story pitch, is that bit at the beginning of, is it Bonfire of the Vanities, where Richard E. Grant comes in, he goes, it's raining heavily, a limo draws up, and there is no, the player, is it the player? Where you go, it's raining, the card, and there is no not this. There is like this.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there is a sort of gender,
maybe it was a,
or maybe it's a team thing in what you're describing, which is like, obviously my idea is shit, but could somebody else like take my shit idea and make it into a better one? Like, is that sort of what's behind it?
I wonder if it's been a reaction to that scene in the, you know, the kind of the scene in the play where we think the cliche is that people go, okay, it's midnight, it's raining, the boat is coming, and the world is ending, or whatever it is. That it's more gentle, it's more tentative. I don't know if this is gendered. There were only women in the room, but I don't know.
That's interesting.
I don't know. Why were there any women? Well, I mean,
was that deliberate?
No,
was it just?
It wasn't deliberate. Alice Birch chose the writers, and she said she felt these were the best writers at that moment for this story. But yeah, I think, well, I'm going to have to ask some male writers who are in writers' room if they now all say not this, because they don't want to sound like a pompous, and just say this is the way it's got to go. You know, it's like it's what I experienced in the writers' room. It was a kind of a group dream. It was 6 people's imaginations coming together to grow a story, and Alice writes and it's very novelistic, actually. I think the series, in that there are so many deep characters and deep storylines. So it was a kind of a group dream. So I think it's hard to dream if you're saying, well, my imagination is the only one that works. Yeah, it was a coming together.
So will you just talk us through the difference between a writer's room and I guess what we had, which was Jeremy Brock, who was he did The Last King of Scotland, which is one of my favourite films, and I knew that he'd do this drama with absolute sensitivity, but he did his research like a journalist, I guess. He went and talked to all those different people. What's your recollection? What's your memory? What's your understanding? All the rest of it. But then it just came back to basically his piece of work. Like, what's the difference between the writer's room, if you like, and the sole scriptwriter now? Is it just do people do more of one or more of another, or do you work with both, or?
I think if a series is longer, you tend to, longer than 3 hours, you tend to have more people.
Okay.
And I also feel like showrunners want to pool a collective imagination, because, well, in the case of your story, there were many facts that didn't need to be imagined. They just needed to be recalled. Although things like, what I love so much about the series is the empathy with which Prince Andrew is played, and the pathos and the humanity in this character, which is something that the writer and Michael Sheen had to invent. I mean, that was an imaginative act. I think that watching the drama and feeling just feeling so terrible. I felt so terribly for Prince.
Did you?
Yes, I did. Yeah. I mean,
yeah,
because how could you not when you watch a drama? There's a human being, and he's being
And it was important, that wasn't it?
I think that's very important. There's a difference between a documentary and a drama.
Yeah.
You have to make everybody feel like a real human being. Yeah, but I think it's a collective pooling. Yeah, the more imaginations you can get in the story, if you're completely making up plot and story, which Alice was, we had to make up 6 hours of story. You need more. You need to like be a magpie and pool lots of different imaginations together.
And did it feel like everyone had got one bit of their story in what you ended up with?
Yes. More than, I mean, all of our imaginations were in the whole thing. I mean, some writers wrote an episode each, so they had an episode to themselves, but within the events that happened, all of our ideas were distilled there. I mean,
and can we talk about a project where you will play another real person who is very much of the screen, who's very well known, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yeah, we can talk about it. Yeah.
I mean, how does that fill you with dread, or?
Yeah, that's people are much more aware of how Elizabeth Taylor walked, talked, sounded, was than they are obviously of Deborah Lipstadt. So yeah, it's very much more. Well, it's a different task, a really different task. Yeah.
And will you go to her movie roles for that? I mean, will you watch how she acts to act like she is, or will you create a totally different sort of character for her from the bits that we don't know?
I would imagine it would be rather like for Michael Sheen. He had interviews with Prince Andrew, but then he had to imagine, well, how does Prince Andrew behave when he's a dad with his daughters? On his own. I mean, Michael, nobody knows, and the writer doesn't know either. So that's an imaginative act. But I think it will be born of finding the feeling of who she is. Yeah, probably to begin with from her screen performances. Yeah. Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
We've got about 15 minutes left, have we? We can go to questions. Actually, we should just talk about, because this is a literary festival.
Yes.
And you've been, she said, suddenly remembering.
Yeah, so lovely to be here.
And you are the voiceover. You are voicing. Tell us about.
Oh yeah, so Pedro Almodóvar, the great Spanish director that I'm sure everybody knows, he has since the 60s written a collection of short stories. He's been writing short stories since the 60s, which he's now collected and published in a volume called The Last Dream, and it's coming out in England, I think this week. And he asked me to do the. I still call it book on tape. I'm like in the Stone Age. What do you call it now? The Audible. Thank you. Audiobook. Thank you, Mark. Book on tape. So he asked me to record two of the stories within this collection in English. And I recorded two. One which comes from very, very early on in his writing career. And he's never published these short stories, so they're really a window into a different part of his imagination, and they're exquisitely beautiful. The early story is a magical realist story about that I voiced, is about Queen Isabella of Spain. And kind of a fairy tale, like a Gothic fairy tale. And then the other one is a much more recent story, and it's written in the first person, and he's written a female narrator who is a cult female film director in Spain who has the migraines of all migraines. It's a bank holiday weekend, and she's trying to go and find pain relief through different places in Madrid, through friends and hospitals, and yeah, it was a wonderful thing to have the relationship with a piece of literature where I was reading it, and I really felt the whole tonal world of Almodovar within these stories, the kind of magical realism and then the kind of edgy, sort of these edgy, strange female characters. So yeah, it was a great joy of my life to voice these 2 short stories for him.
Did you meet him? Did he come and
Oh, I have met him.
Yes,
I have met him over the years in different places, and I'm an enormous fan. Yeah.
Incredible. Should we take some questions? Is that a good idea? I'm just going to randomly pick first hand, and there's a hand at the back. This lady with her hand. Yeah, she's waving now, just there.
Jack Blackburn from The Times. Only when Rachel mentioned about watching the series and having empathy for Andrew, you said that was very important in the drama. I'm wondering, when you were going through the process of that interview and its fallout in real life, did you have empathy for him in real life?
Yes. Yes, I did. I mean, it's as simple as that. And I think that's something that we've tried to include in the drama, is the sense of, you know, how journalists approach a story and how what the fallout of all that can sort of mean as well. We spent a lot of time thinking about not just him but those around him, and of course, you know, it was a story predominantly, weirdly, about the women. It was the women who were Epstein's victims, and it was the women who were sort of in the room with the interview, and it was the women that formed a very close bond around Andrew in terms of his family and his daughters. And so I felt that there were sort of concentric circles of concern, if you like, for all those, you know, sort of groups.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Eager.
Hi, Charlotte.
This question is actually not for Emily, who I swim with most days, but for Rachel. Rachel,
I don't see you. Where are you?
I'm here.
Oh, hi.
It's good. Yeah. A wave is a good thing.
Yeah, a wave is
in
good.
This room, it's nice.
Rachel, have you? I know you've produced a bit.
Yeah.
But have you ever directed? And if not, are you considering directing? Is that a way you'd like to take your career?
Possibly. I've directed a short film about 15 years ago with Joel Edgerton, which I wrote and directed. It's a short film. Yeah, possibly. I might try and direct. I would start with another short film. Yeah, it's possible.
And why?
Well, I love stories. I love storytelling. I've been a storyteller on one side of the camera or the stage for, you know, my whole adult life. So I'm just curious about, yeah, being more, you know, the director is more the author of the whole story. So that interests me.
That's very interesting to know. Thank you.
Hand right at the back. I think I should start at the back, shouldn't I? See one hand there, and anyone else while we've got the mics roving. Just here. Thanks. There's a lady just, yeah, exactly.
Hello. I'm Bella Thomas. I just wanted to ask, is the real revelation of the Prince Andrew interview less that he's a sex abuser, but he's stupid, pompous, and a man of very bad judgment, rather than necessarily actually, I mean, sleeping with a 17-year-old 3 times, you know, many people have done that. Perhaps he should have checked. But is that the greater revelation, is his pomposity and stupidity?
Just so I can look, thank you. One of the first questions that Ruth Wilson asked me, funny enough, when we met, and we'd been sort of back and forth emailing, and she came into the newsagent studio and she said, "Is he guilty? Do you think he's guilty?" And I said straight away, "Guilty of what?" Because we will never know. I mean, one of the things that is both important and unsatisfying, I guess, is that there has been no closure, there's been no conclusion. You know, Epstein's victims never had their day in court. But I think what the drama showed was that he was, and I think it comes in the words of Edward Young, that he was guilty of a deafness, really, to how he would be perceived, how the British public would hear his words, and how he sort of seemed incapable of acknowledging the sort of stupidity of staying with somebody who was a convicted sex offender. And I remember that one of the moments that was absolutely a turning point in the interview, the real interview for me, was when I said, do you have any regrets about your friendship with Epstein? And he used this really curious form of words. He said, still not. And he went on to describe all the interesting people that he'd met, in Epstein's house. And I was like...
And how important it was for his business enterprises.
Exactly.
And how helpful it had been for him. So it was a characterological moment of a complete lack of being in touch with the significance of what you were asking him about.
It was a flat-footedness, wasn't it? And I suppose, at the heart of this is a much bigger question, which is, do we want our royal family to be like us? Yeah. Or do we not? Do we want to elevate them into a place where they are removed from sort of normal life? And I guess we haven't resolved that yet. But when you get an answer like that, I mean, for us, what was interesting was I don't think it was the interview, weirdly, that Andrew was unhappy with, because he did it and he was happy afterwards, and we, that's
what you always said, that he gave the interview he wanted to give. He was very happy with it. He gave the interview
he wanted to give, and he invited me back to the palace and said, next time you come, we'll talk about this. So it was an extraordinary sort of note to end on, but I think he just hadn't been prepared for how the story would then be heard, either through the press and through the headlines the next day, or through the even the memes and the comedy shows and the sort of response of the British public. And I think that was when it sort of dawned. And there's a moment in the drama where I think Ruth uses the word guileless. And that seems to me quite an important word, which definitely, it doesn't talk to, we've been very careful, we don't talk to guilt or innocence about the acts that he's accused of. We just talk about this sense of being just tin-eared, I guess. And I think you've probably put your finger on it there in the question.
And there was probably a reason for it, wasn't it? The Queen's saying, never complain, never explain. It's best not to go into things, because if you are...
Obviously, that's not the lesson we want, as journalists, people to take away. Don't ever talk to the press. It will not go well. Just keep
Definitely
your
not. No, I was just speaking to your notion that they're not us. They're living in a separate kind
of reality. It's a separate world.
Yeah,
it's a world reality. Without, Twitter and Instagram and the right to reply, and, they don't sue. And right, I'll shut up. Questions? Yes.
I'm feeling a bit nervous. This is my first time as well to be.
Hello.
Hello. I have watched the episode, the scandal, and I was wondering, there's a part in that Emily's playing where Andrew asks whether any of you have been abused. And I noticed that was sort of kind of quite jarring for Emily. And I wondered whether that's something that... I was curious about whether that's something that has happened, and it was maybe an element of wanting to do the interview was because of wanting to get that voice for the people who have had that kind of abuse. And also the moment where the award is being given, there was that person who said about the victims, forgetting to mention the victims, and I noticed sort of kind of almost like a mood drop after all the heightened energy of being top of the world and then dropping. Yeah, so as a psychotherapist, I guess that was very sort of curious for me.
I'm so pleased you raised that point, because actually, when we won we did mention the victims, actually, and it was really important that we put the victims, in that acknowledgement in the speech. And I totally understood. I mean, one of the things I had to learn about the drama was sometimes you just have to let go, and for creative reasons, it was important that he sort of put that in to sort of show the jar of the glitziness of, a ballroom in London versus the sort of stories at home. I mean, I have to say, you know, you can go and check it. You know, that RTS I remember really well, and we definitely did talk about them. But it was, I totally understood from a dramatic perspective why that was a helpful thing to kind of show the sort of the worlds colliding. Because, you know, as journalists, you're on a high the whole time, you know, and it's adrenaline and it's cortisone, and you're like, this is amazing, this is amazing. And then the sort of reality of the story catches up with you. You know, it's a sort of weird. It's your way of sort of slightly processing the trauma that you're dealing with in terms of, you know, if you're covering a terrorist attack or a shooting, whatever, you kind of, you know, that and the vodka. You sort of, you know, you live on this high of what you've done. And I found it myself that actually, sometimes, like, I'd cover something incredibly traumatic, like the Bataclan shootings in Paris, you know, and I would not let it touch me until I got to the end of the day and I'd watch somebody else's coverage and just find, you know, it's absolutely weeping, because you hold it all together until you don't need to, and then you sort of go, this just happened, you know. So actually, I suppose that was what the drama a little bit was trying to kind of go, you know, journalists get lost in their bubble until you sort of have that moment. The question, it's a really good point, because I assumed that had been fictionalized. And then I talked to my team and they said, no, it really happened. And they'd told the writer that it really happened. And I find it incredible that I had blanked it out. I don't know what, I mean, like, you're the psychotherapist, right? So you can deal with that. He must have said it because it wouldn't have been in the writing if Esme and Stuart hadn't remembered it from that meeting. And they wouldn't have made something up like that. And we've had that conversation. But I find it extraordinary that I don't know. I must have lost it somewhere along the way. I didn't ever remember it.
Thank you.
Yes, whoever's got the mic. There's one hand there and one hand there. Yeah.
Thank you. Fantastic discussion. One of the points that I found fascinating from the conversation is the relationship between fact and dramatization. I wanted to ask each of you a question, if that's all right, on those grounds. So, Emily, has your experience of the drama caused you to reconsider your journalism? And Rachel, Denial, fantastic film, great role. That film was very much about the nature of truth and the nature of history. I'd just love it if you could just give us some thoughts around how you dramatize a story about the nature of truth itself, and what goes into your mind when you're playing the key character in a film about the very nature of truth itself. Thanks.
Go on. Oh, me first? Why not? Or do you need more time?
Well, I didn't have to think about. It's a very beautiful, profound, abstract question, but I didn't have to think of it abstractly. I had this story of Deborah Lipstadt, who was sued because she had dared to write that David Irving was not a good historian, essentially, and she was so tenacious and feisty, and it was really the character that led me to be able to play it. There was nothing too abstract about it. She didn't feel like she should have to debate Holocaust deniers in the same way that someone wouldn't debate moon landings with somebody else. It was her character. It was great writing. So in playing a character who's
But you said something really interesting about David Hare writing it, because he wrote it in 2015, 2014.
Yes.
Like, we were just on the edge of the whole Trumpification of the world.
Well,
right?
for him, the story, the kind of meta story of this real story which I mentioned was painstakingly, biographically conceived by the director, down to the scarf. In David Hare's mind, it was really about Trump and about alternative facts and what he felt was about to happen, and he was completely right, David Hare. So that was the understory or the overstory of the screenplay for David Hare. I wish he was here to talk about it.
And has the drama made me consider fact and fiction in a different way, or has it made me... No, I mean, I think it's important to recognise they're different worlds. You know, I mean, there was a moment where I was reading an article actually, and the article was halfway between a plot summary and a news story about the relationship between Andrew and Charles. And I was like, oh, this is weird. Like, what's just happened? This story was sort of starting to tell the story of our drama, and then it turned into a news story about whether Charles wanted Andrew to move out of Royal Lodge. And I went, wait, this is slightly doing my head in, because I sort of think you have to, the first thing I'd say about the drama is it is a beautifully crafted, fabulously acted drama, and I really want people to take away that it's elegiac and it's respectful, and I think it's thoughtful, it's beautifully crafted. And so go to that, go to the interview, watch the interview for the interview, and then go to the drama and understand the drama and the context it's put in. And I think it's quite important to keep those worlds different. But do I, as a journalist, still want to make more drama? Yes, I do.
And you should. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Have we got...
Perhaps not about you again.
No,
Yeah.
We've done that.
Yeah.
Never, ever mention it again. We've got 23 seconds. Is there one quick question? Or yes.
I do have two quick questions, one for each of you, and it follows on from, Emily, what you were just saying, wanting to perhaps make another drama. Have you changed your approach to journalism and how you now work? Because you were saying a lot of it was racking of memories of not just you, but the team. And Rachel, this not being a press junket and having more space and time to talk, I didn't hear the word microwave or geranium, but did you have words in your repertoire that you were determined to get
Very
in?
nice.
I had no, this has been an expansive
We'll only
and
find that
lovely
afterwards,
chat.
in years to come, probably.
Yeah. It's our secret, yeah.
I don't think that has changed. What's changed my journalism a little bit is that I'm talking in a different way to I stopped doing Newsnight. I do The News Agents, which is a daily podcast now. And we've found a whole new audience, actually, through that. And we do something that is... I mean, we still do hard interviews, and we do accountability, and we break stories. We did the Chancellor and got her to sort of fess up about her tax moves in October. So I don't think we haven't left any of the Newsnight journalism behind, but we do now talk in a different way, and I think reach people in a different way. Normally, with dogs or in running kits or, unpacking the dishwasher. And so it's sort of, I quite like the world of the podcast, the show, because we've just found new people that have come to news in a way that they hadn't before. And so I suppose that's been the shift for me rather than anything to do with the interview or the drama. Yeah.
And my real answer would be, if you're being asked questions by Emily Maitlis, you have no need of microwaves or geraniums up your sleeve. Yeah.
Thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.